We are the Bolt Brotherhood.
One team, one family.
We are a diverse team.
As Falcons, in our team huddle, the goal is to score.
But we will serve to reach beyond the playing field.
To build communities and our country.
To support all backgrounds, black, brown, and white.
To pursue greater opportunities.
When it comes to education, justice, healthcare, and peace.
So we may all win in life.
Our mission extends beyond winning.
Our mission is to stand against racism.
To promote diversity and inclusion.
Our mission is to demonstrate
and fight for respect and human dignity. We aim to tell our country and the world that Black Lives Matter.
And to cure the disease of discrimination
and racism in our country.
Black lives have not been
and are not treated as equal in our society.
Racial profiling,
Jim Crow,
mass incarceration,
redlining,
police brutality.
From the Bolt Brotherhood, enough is enough. This is not a political choice of Marxism or capitalism.
This is the basic regard and respect for human life and dignity.
This is why Black Lives Matter.
If the intent of our country is justice and liberty for all,
we must first acknowledge that Black Lives Matter.
We must stand in unity for racism to end.
We stand in unity to be part of the solution.
It's not enough for us to be not racist.
It's time to be anti-racist.
It's time to be anti-racist.
It's time to be anti-racist.
It's time for me to recognize my bias.
It's time to use
my voice,
my talent,
my platform.
To stand against unjust police brutality
and institutional discrimination.
Take action, take responsibility, and take a stance.
Listen to understand.
Listen with an open heart.
Listen to our experiences.
And empathize with the pain that racism causes so many.
Educate yourself on the role that race plays in our history.
We will fight for fair treatment.
Justice and equality of Black Americans.
Brown Americans, and all Americans.
This goes beyond the football field.
Because Black Lives Matter.
Because Black Lives Matter.
Because Black Lives Matter.
It's time to open our eyes.
It's time to open our eyes.
And to fight and serve for justice.
It's time to make our country and our world a better place.
It's bigger than football.
It's bigger than football.
It's bigger than football.
There's no neutral nor in between when it comes to racism.
You have to take a stance.
Because the Bolt Brotherhood believes Black Lives Matter.
Something else that my friend from West Point told me that I'll never forget is that he was talking about how they were trained to absolutely be colorblind, and that one of the trick questions that your commander may ask is, Plebe Johnson, how many blacks are there in your platoon? And the answer is, sir, I don't know, sir. So
isn't that great?
Yeah. I'm just curious whether there was also something like that going on at Air Force as far as being bred into you that we're to be colorblind. We're all the same. We're all U.S. soldiers.
I think it's more that something that my parents drilled into me. So we never thought about it. Maybe when we start talking about this issue, I'll tell you the reaction of a conversation that I had with two young men who are juniors in high school now. One's Hispanic and one's Chinese. And they were brought up the same way I was. You just don't think about it. And I don't remember race ever being an issue. I mean, but the black cadets that were there were just like the rest of us.
Yeah, well, it was that story that he told me that caused me to really get interested in you first telling me about this Black Lives Matter video, because when I watched it, I'm just like, based on what he had told me about West Point, and which I assumed is similar at the Air Force Academy about being colorblind, and that video is the absolute opposite of being colorblind. It's basically telling us that we all need to pay attention to our race. If you're white, you better recognize that You've got special privileges because of the color of your skin. So you're special and unique and better acknowledge all of the benefits you got from being white, no matter how you were raised, where you were raised, doesn't matter, of course. It's just all about one thing, and that's the color of your skin. And then if you're a black person, well, you've been raised in a country that discriminates against you and inherently looks down upon you simply because of the color of your skin. Black lives are not treated as equal in our society. Period. That's the statement direct from the video.
Now you know why we've been fighting it so hard.
Yeah. So I want to just kind of get a flavor. I mean, I get worked up about the video, but you as a graduate and a retired lieutenant general, help us feel what you feel, how visceral it is for you, you know, as to being a graduate, being so involved in the academy and seeing all the great men and women who have graduated from there. Help us just get into your mind and your heart as far as how much this video bothers you.
Before I do that, Jim, I just need to have one quick disclaimer, because we're going to go down a road here that is seemingly throwing my academy and my Air Force under the bus, and some of the leaders. And these are guys that I love, people that we've flown with. I mean, this group has grown from a handful initially to 20. We could be 2,000. I think we all feel the same way. There's just a blind spot, or maybe this, the way we've kind of convinced ourselves, it's this ideology that has just slowly crept into the military and is now taking up residence at our service academies. So how do we feel about it? I mean, I get a little thing every day that says from the Gazette, and has some headlines. And the headline was, Air Force football takes firm social stance in support of Black Lives Matter. And I go, this can't be true. And it directs you in the article to the Facebook page. So I looked up the Facebook page, and my reaction was exactly the same as yours. And I looked and I said, well, wait a minute. I mean, the military's supposed to stay apolitical. That was number one thought I had. And number two thought I had was, why in the world are we associating ourselves with a violent Marxist organization? And so I wrote the superintendent a letter. I let a day go by. I said, there has to be a retraction of sorts. There wasn't. So I wrote a letter to the superintendent, who worked for me when I was Air Commander Europe. He was a colonel. Thought kind of owed me a little bit, because I put him in this 1-star billet that made him a general officer. Doesn't really matter, but so I wrote him, I said, Jay, if you produced a video that said, our institution and our football team has stood strong against racism from the beginning of our institution, and we want to raise the bar even higher, you'd have 50,000 plus graduates, every single one of us, saying spot on. But when you essentially, like it or not, intentional or not, associate our alma mater with an organization like Black Lives Matter, it's going to be divisive. So I think, and so this group kind of formed because, unbeknownst to me, other people were telling them the same thing. And so,
what's remind me the name of the superintendent at the time?
It was Lieutenant General Jay Silveria.
Jay Silveria.
Yeah.
And he he just left a few months ago, right?
September 23rd.
And he's now where?
Texas A&M.
Right. And is he head of the school? Is he the chancellor or whatever they call it there?
No, he's head of one of the departments. I've forgotten which one.
And do you know whether he was even aware of the video before you guys saw it?
It's a great question. Nobody's ever really been able to nail it down. When I saw the video and wrote that letter, the next thing I did was pick up the phone and call a very good mentor of mine, very dear friend, class of 68. And he's on the Air Force Academy Athletic Corporation, the AFAC. And so they control the purse strings for the coaches. And so I said, Charlie, did you see that video? And he said, yeah, I saw that video. And the second I did, I picked up the phone and called Nate Pine, the athletic director, and expressed my dissatisfaction. So I said, wow, I mean, it's just unbelievable. And I had sent him the letter I had sent to Jay Silveria, and, he, just like all of us, were shaking our heads. Well, there was enough people that were complaining to the president of the Association of Graduates, who is a former superintendent. And he said, well, let me try to see if I can broker a deal here. So the very first thing we did, there's about 8 of us, maybe 10, we had a Zoom meeting with Coach Calhoun, and went around the room, and everybody had their piece to say. And then my pilot training roommate finally came up on the net and said, Coach, we've talked a lot about how it's so upsetting to all of us. The question is, what are we going to do about it? And went on to say, I think at the very bare minimum, we need to take it down and maybe have some explanation. So I jumped in there at that time and said, I took the liberty, because I don't even know half of you on this video, but I went out with an email and I pulsed everybody, Coach. And everybody here is unanimous in what my former roommate says. And so he said, well, what if I told you that, and he names, I believe, I don't know for sure, a Black graduate that's a coach at University of Oklahoma. Or I think it was a college in Oklahoma. And he called me up and said, that's the best video I've ever seen produced. It takes a firm social stance. And I said to him, I said, well, Coach, you got a different opinion from 8 of us here. To us, it feels like you're trying to fight racism by being racist. That video, to me, is the very definition of racist. And so, he kind of put his head down for a second and said, well, what if I did take it down? Then the media outlets got a hold of it. And this guy is very motivational. And he gave a very great talk about, how we're responsible at the Air Force Academy for producing officers, not just football players, not just people who come here to play sports. We're about building character. We're the future of the Air Force. I said, Coach, you just said what you should say to the media outlet should anybody raise an issue. So the group morphed in its reaction to the video from just taking it down, given all the resistance, that, well, apparently there needs to be a teaching moment. Because the people who would object to taking it down, and believe it or not, Jim, it's not just along racial lines, it's probably more along political persuasion lines.
Yeah.
So
a couple questions about that meeting. Did you determine in that meeting that whose idea the video was to begin with?
I had a little bit of an idea when the superintendent responded to my email. He said, hey, General Bishop, let me show you from a different perspective what went on. We've got this movement. These guys took a cue from the Chief of Staff of the Air Force and the Command Chief Master Sergeant of the Air Force, and trying to make a statement that, we're doing everything we can to be an integrated institution, something like that. So I went back to him 2 or 3 times, and I could tell I wasn't getting anywhere with emails, and I think that this guy's over his head with just dealing with COVID and classes coming in, and I said, I'm just going to let it drop. And that's where I had until this video came up. I'm not sure I answered your first question there. I got off on the tangent telling you.
Yeah, well, a couple follow-up questions. First of all, as you sit here today, do you know whose idea it was to produce this thing to begin with?
It was either football players or the coaches. The superintendent's words were those young men.
Okay. And in the video, it's the head coach Calhoun, and then all the other guys are assistant coaches, or are some of them players?
No, they're as far as we know, we went on the Gazette, and it looks like they're all all coaches, no players.
Mm-hmm. So you believe that it was basically Calhoun's idea?
I don't. I believe it was probably one of the younger assistant coaches or a player potentially, and whether or not they had any, ill intent in putting the team up to that, nobody knows. In fact, the 4-star that was brought in to mediate this, he and I had that very discussion. We want to say and think that it was, there was no intent.
Mm-hmm.
In fact, the reason I don't think it's Coach Calhoun is because 2 gentlemen who were part of the group initially, they're members of the Air Force Foundation. And that's an organization that raises money. And they've both withdrawn from the group now, given the avenue that we're going down, because they know, we all know that unfortunately, the byproduct of these efforts of taking this public are going to be people walking away from support of the academy programs. That's why we kept it so secret and didn't spread it.
You guys just wanted it taken down and thought that would not be too heavy of a lift once people kind of realized what was wrong with the video. They got caught up in the moment. We've seen similar videos that the NBA was putting out during their time in the bubble with all their Black Lives Matter stuff. They were doing very similar videos. So, it's a football team and they're seeing other sports teams doing it. So they're thinking that they're going to do it. The big difference.
A lot of teams have done it, but as we've all noted, that none are as offensive as the one that our own alma mater did. And, it just seemed too easy of a fix. I mean, we've all been on Facebook, and all you have to do is take your mouse and hide from timeline or delete, click. Takes, 2 or 3 seconds.
But what I think that you have learned through this process, which has been an unsuccessful many months long attempt to simply get this video taken down,
1.5,
is that this is not a problem just among the coaches of the football team. This goes all the way up to the absolute top of the Air Force, because the superintendent is in on it. He either knew about it or certainly had no problem with it. And we could talk about him a little bit more. There's reason to know that he's a real kind of left thinker in that regard. And then you guys filed an official complaint with the Secretary of the Air Force. And just, I think it was last week, your complaint was rejected. And they determined that this didn't violate any military codes, Department of Defense rules and regulations, even ones that say that we are not to support any political cause, political party, advocate for any particular cause, when it's very clear that's exactly what this video is doing. But the Secretary of the Air Force office has said there's nothing wrong with this video. So,
well, we think so. I mean, I tried to clarify that up front the week before we got the announcement, because we have had a back channel with the secretary, and we had indication to believe that she was wanting things to play out, that she agreed with our position. So I clarified the week before the determination was made, will the secretary see this, or do we need to make sure that, she sees whatever way you decide? And he says it will be routed through the SecApp. So, I guess that's her stamp of approval on it. Going back.
Well, hold on, General. I just have to clarify something. You're saying that you guys got some back channel communication from the Secretary of the Air Force.
We have a contact. I don't want to give away too much here. We have a contact that we have been communicating with that communicates with the SecApp.
Okay. But it's that same office that just rejected your complaint in writing and went through every one of the possible code violations and ruled as to each one of them, this did not violate that code. So
it was the Inspector General that made that determination. Obviously had to have been done with the office, OGC, I think they call it, Office of General Counsel, that works for the Secretary. And what I was making sure is that whatever response we got back, that would be a response that was from the Secretary, that she had approved it somewhere along the line.
Okay, so your complaint was rejected. Do you
Correct.
think she was involved or not involved?
I think I have no reason to believe she was not to. I was told that she would be. We've gone back and asked that question. I haven't received a response yet.
Yeah, and it was a very disappointing rejection of your complaint because it provided no reasoning, no factual analysis. It was just perfunctory. It doesn't violate this. It doesn't violate this. It doesn't violate this, without any explanation as to how they came to the conclusion that this thing does not advocate for a cause. When, you know, there's even stuff in there about healthcare for all and, you know, mass incarceration of blacks, racial profiling.
Yeah, Jim Crow laws, police brutality, redlining, mass incarcerations, racial profiling, systemic racism. No evidence, nothing of all that. All these untruths that we felt are being taught. I mean, these are academy coaches to the future officers of the United States, part of the indoctrination.
Yes. So this indoctrination is being endorsed not just among football coaches, not just among the superintendent of the Air Force Academy, but at the highest echelons of the Air Force, it appears to me.
You know, it appears, you know, we can only speculate, but why would it take 4 retired Air Force lawyers 2 hours to tell us that that video violated the DOD 134410 and the AFI 51508? 2 hours. And it takes the Air Force 2 months to tell us it doesn't. We felt, after 5-6 weeks, we're being slow-rolled until after the election. Who knows? I mean, especially, I think the strongest part of that case, and I've heard this from our mediator, who was brokering, talking to us, talking to headquarters Air Force, not on the secretary side, but on the military side. And I think we would have gotten a response more quickly from the IG, from what I've been told, if we hadn't supplemented the IG complaint when President Trump came out with his executive orders against critical race theory. Then it became a little bit more difficult. So
yeah, let's talk about critical race theory for a moment, which some people kind of refer to as the 1619 Project and so on. But race is the center of everything in America.
You know where it comes from?
No.
I just learned this week from talking to Dr. Scott, that they put race in between critical theory. Critical theory was taught in the Marxist schools in Frankfurt.
Yeah. Yeah, you certainly see how they're using race as a way to divide. You know, Marxism is all about the classes, right? One class oppressing another. That's what gives you the basis to overturn the whole thing, is that you have an oppressed class. So in America, to say that blacks are the oppressed class, which they certainly were many, 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 many years ago, but they want to maintain that still today, they are the oppressed class. And that's what you get directly from the video, which is that black lives are not treated as equal in our society. That means they are an oppressed class. And if you have an oppressed class, that class should rise up and overthrow the oppressor. It's all about the oppressed and the oppressor. So, you jogged my memory that is the foundation of critical race theory. All comes from Marxism and so on. So Trump, to his credit, issues that order. Shockingly, critical race theory apparently had been being taught. Who knew, but that there were federal agencies that were teaching this nonsense, that we even needed such an order. But it begs the question, as you think about Air Force Academy, critical race theory, did you guys determine, was critical race theory being taught at the academy?
We don't think, and Dr. Scott's been the best expert looking at that. He doesn't see it that it had gone as far as West Point had. I mean, West Point actually has a class and a curriculum. But I was just talking with a recent graduate the day before yesterday, a guy that's like my own son. And I was asking him, he had looked at the video back in July, and I asked him what his thought was. And he said, B, I couldn't even finish it. And so I said, when I called him the other day, have you gone back and looked at that video more? And do you have any more input? He says, I can see the 4 guys. I mean, he'd bring 4 guys up to our little ski cabin and we'd ski together. He named them off. So they all think it's ridiculous. My 3 roommates here that he's rooming with now in the airplane where he's based, they all think it's ridiculous. I mean, that's 7 people right there. But he said, I felt as I was going through the school, 2014, 2018, I felt the culture shifting underneath my feet, as an example. So was it specifically taught? He gave me an example of they brought a female executive in from Facebook to speak to him. And her comments really made the males feel inferior. And he gave me some of the things that, she said. So
I wonder if that was Sheryl Sandberg.
I think it was. Not sure, but I think I've heard that name this week. That may have been it.
Mm-hmm. That's just what we need is Facebook executives teaching our military. Times have changed, huh?
I mean, aside from the Zoom meeting, dozens of phone calls. General Clark, the new superintendent, 3 weeks ago said he had over 300 emails on this topic. And to be honest, some of them, I think the majority maybe, are positive for the video. And that's now grown to be, I guess, the big motivation for the group is that's not right. We need to have that conversation. Being offended is not just a one-way street. Why can't we together work on race issues? Why do we have to fight racism with race?
Thank you again to Lieutenant General Rod Bishop for appearing exclusively on our show. We certainly hope that this story is going to get picked up and be heard and seen on a wider scale because it certainly deserves that. Thank you to our producer, Michael Parker. Thank you to our intern, Jake Wall. We'll be back next week with another episode of The Hidden Truth Show.
Thank you for listening to The Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow. You can find us at hiddentruthshow.com. Follow us on Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram at Hidden Truth Show. Join us again next week for another episode of Hidden Truth Show with Jim Breslow.